Let's head into the papers now. What the headlines are saying in Nigerian papers, quite diverse, but really interesting. I have in the studio CEO, CKN News, Chris Kende-Nwandu, and also a senior researcher in the studio, Cyril Abaku. Gentlemen, good morning.
Thank you,
Thank
man.
God it's Friday.
Thank God.
The Friday are exciting times.
It is.
You know.
It is.
Okay, let's begin with the Blueprint newspaper this morning. That's where we'll start from. And it's focusing on xenophobic attacks. Nigeria, South Africa to raise compensation committee. Reciprocate our ease of doing business, Buhari tells Ramaphosa. And President's visit allays our fears, Nikasa. That's the Association of Nigerians in South Africa. All right, that's fallout from the discussion between Nigerian president and South African president yesterday. You recall the president is still in South Africa. From there, let's move to the News Direct. News Direct is focusing on port terminal crisis. Why NPA, that's the Nigeria Ports Authority, must reverse termination of Buhari's agreement. That's BUA is a company, and as stakeholders seek justice for the BUA. All right. Moving from there to the Daily Times. Daily Times is focusing on the 2020 budget. National Assembly proposes 727.4 billion naira increase in expenditure. Increases customs revenue to 1.5 trillion naira and jacks up oil revenue by 172 billion naira. And pegs new borrowing at 1.5 trillion naira. Increases capital to MDAs by 357 billion naira. Certainly we'll be seeing a lot of budget issues as the president is set to present the budget to the National Assembly sometime next week on Tuesday. All right, that's the Daily Times. Daily Trust is the next paper we go to now, and is telling us a story of how gunmen kidnapped Kaduna schoolgirls and teachers. And that story has been on. Parents evacuate children from school, and victim called grandmother from the bush. It was really troubling times there for the victims and families of those who family members have been kidnapped. All right, gentlemen, let's. Our president is still in South Africa. We expect him back today, all things being equal, certainly. The quite interesting discussions between President Buhari and President Cyril Ramaphosa when it comes to, engagements and way forward. A lot of people talked about the issue of xenophobic attacks, also xenophobia, fallout of xenophobia, which was part of the issues on the front burner. But it wasn't just xenophobia that they discussed. They talked about issues of bilateral trade, business engagement and all of that. Cyril, let me start with you. How robust would you tag the discussions and engagement between President Buhari and Ramaphosa?
Let me start by saying that much of the grounds they've covered were predictable or predicted. It was specifically to deepen the binational relations that we already had. You remember that this relationship dates back to in the latest phase of it, 2000, at the turn of the century, when Nigeria became a democracy. Obasanjo and Thabo Mbeki were touring the world and asking for assistance for Africa. Nigeria for its size and South Africa for its industrial strength were taken as the two linchpins to drive that process. So, in any case, South Africa and Nigeria going to war does not pay the continent because we're the two strongest nations on the continent. So it was important that Nigeria, who is the victim, we who have suffered from those attacks and who have clearly borne the brunt, still took the initiative to go there and offer forgiveness and to also discuss business, discuss all sorts of things with them. I mean, in the broader sense possible. So it is good that the president took the step, and we hope that what we have seen reported in the media, on the one hand, while that is on the one hand, that both presidents should have sat down to speak heart to heart, to make Mr. Ramaphosa realize that, look, whatever rhetoric they want to use to cover what has happened, the government must sit up to take responsibility in ensuring that foreigners in their country stay safe. It's not just about Nigerians. When Nigeria speaks, she speaks as the continent's big brother. Zambia, all those other countries, they're also affected. Importantly, Mr. President told his counterpart that, look, Nigeria has moved up in ease of doing business ranking. and they said we made business. There are a lot of South African companies in Nigeria. It's not just MTN and Co. There are close to 200 of them in this country doing business and making a lot of money.
At different levels.
Yes. And so he said, look, business in Nigeria has even become much easier. You know, if you even compare what they have here in terms of investment and what we have there, there's no basis for comparison. They far outweigh what. So
it's very skewed towards South Africa.
So it is important that such discussions take place and then
very good. Now, CKN, when it comes to, we have always heard Nigerians saying government should be very decisive, government should be very firm. Does Nigeria really have what it takes to be firm towards South Africa when it comes to compelling it to do things in certain ways?
We do. With all due respect, we do. In terms of trade, there's a lot of imbalance between Nigeria and South Africa. So for whatever reason, if we tend to cough, South Africa to some extent will catch a cold. If you remember vividly what happened a few years back, about 2 years or thereabout, when the Nigerian government, through the NCC, sanctioned MTN and imposed a high level of fine on the telecom company. The South African government, it wasn't just a trade war. It became a government to government that the South African government have to intervene and appeal to the Nigerian government, to the president, that they should just tamper justice with mercy. So, and just as Sri rightly said, in terms of number of organizations and the rest of them companies, you have so many South African companies in Nigeria. There are so many of them, you can name them. The problem for me is how Nigerian businesses can penetrate the South African market. That has been a big problem. There have been several companies in Nigeria that tried to do that, and they never succeeded. And but whenever they come here, we just allow them to have their way and rest. I remember vividly a particular media house that went to South Africa. I don't want to mention the name. And after just some months, they couldn't stand it, and they were asked to go. Presently in Nigeria, we know that in terms of pay TV, there's only one monopoly, and quote and unquote, it's a South African company. So, but I'm happy to hear that about 30 bilateral trade agreement has been reached and signed between Nigerian president or Nigeria and South Africa. And our president was also firm in saying that the South African government should look at the issue of xenophobic attack. Although the president of South Africa wanted to make it look like an African thing, but for me, it was more of a Nigerian thing than an African thing, because how many other things. So, and some people, Nigerians, have also been saying, why is it that the president is going to South Africa instead of the South African? That is not like that. You know, our people, they always, if you go out to the social media, that's been saying.
But this meeting was arranged long before.
Exactly. That's what most people don't know. So,
but it only coincided with the timing and all of that.
But I think the timing was good, and which is what some of us said initially, that when the federal government sent a delegation to meet with the South African government, we thought that that wasn't good enough. But it's good enough that our president is there and this will be done. All
right. Cyril, one other issue that was raised between the two countries, which they agreed to work on, is the issue of early signals when issues of xenophobia or anything like that comes up. I wonder what role Nigeria has to play in that regard when it comes to South African territory, when it comes to South African businesses that affect Nigerians, but what role can Nigeria play in that?
Well, early warning signs, as they normally call it, there's no need to hide the truth, Mike. Our foreign intelligence services must up their game in that regard. There's no joke about it. I don't believe I think a bit of passivity also comes to play, because if I'm told now that we didn't see any of these attacks coming, I wouldn't believe it. You know, because so our services must up their game, and then there are a number of corridors that can be exploited. As fun as it may sound, there is an association of South African married to Nigerians. You know, there's a union like that. So these are different levels, okay? Different community levels. Community of Nigerian scholars and their counterparts in South Africa and so on, at different levels, who must continue to engage. I think Nigeria is partly to blame for what is happening. If you look at colonialism, after it ended, there are a lot of aid agencies from the West in Africa doing all kinds of things. After we helped South Africa, Zimbabwe and so on to gain independence, We just left them like that. We should have been part and parcel of.
But isn't that how Nigeria does it? It's the same thing
Sierra Leone, Liberia, and so on. We should have. You know,
we always play.
We always don't have an agenda.
We always play the big brother role.
Yes.
Father Christmas, do it for them and leave.
And you see, Mike.
Yeah, we have to leave you here for now. We have to leave you here. Thank you very much, Cyril. Cyril Ramaphosa. I would have dashed to Ramaphosa this morning. All right, thank you very much, Cyril Abaku, for coming on the program. And CKN, the youngest lawyer in town.
Well, it's time to take a look at stories making the headlines in Nigerian newspapers. I have with me in the studio CEO CKN News, Chris Kehinde-Nwandu, and senior researcher TVC News, Cyril Abaku. Gentlemen, thank you for coming on TVC Breakfast. All right, let's head straight to the papers now, and I begin with the blueprint. Xenophobic attack, Nigeria, South Africa to raise compensation committee. Reprocrate ease of doing business. Well, President's visit allays our fear, Nekasa. We'll move on to the News Direct now. Port terminal crisis. Why NPA must reverse termination of BUA lease agreement as stakeholders seek justice for BUA. And on the front page of the Daily Times, 2020 budget, National Assembly proposes 727.4 billion naira increase in expenditure, increases customs revenue to 1.5 trillion naira, jacks up all revenue by 172 billion naira, pegs new borrowing at 1.5 trillion naira, increases capital to MDAs by 357 billion naira. And finally, on the front page of the Daily Trust, how gunmen kidnap Kaduna schoolgirl teachers, parents evacuate children from school, victim called grandmother from Bush. Gentlemen, we'll be looking at this story, and there is an infograph on the front page of this paper, although it can be seen on the screen right now, and it's talked about major kidnappings from schools since 2014. GSS Chibok, which was one of the major kidnappings, were 276 victims. Nigeria International Turkish School in Ogun, 8 students, 5 students, 3 staff. We had Igbonla, Lagos, 6 students, GSS Dapchi, 110. GGSS Moriki, Zurmi local government, Zamfara State, we have 6 students, Engravers College, Kakao Deji Village, Kaduna, 6 students, 2 staff. How worrisome is this, CKN?
Very worrisome, because we thought that we've had the last of this. The issue of kidnapping students came to the fore with the issue of the Chibok girls that were kidnapped some time ago, some years back. And within that period also, we also forgotten that we also have the Dapchi issue. Then there was also the a time when the bandits stormed the boys' school somewhere, I think in Yobe or thereabouts, and killed Buniyadi and killed over 40 students and the rest of them. So we've always had this issue, and few months back we had a situation within the Ikorodu Ekpe, as it's in Lagos. Some of them stayed for some days, and
which has been
outlined here too. So we'll be having the issue of the problem now, as we're having this, is that most of these bandits are now targeting what we call sub-targets, and vulnerable people, especially the students this time around, like the issue that the one that happened in Kaduna on Thursday, where they just passed through an open fence or through a hole in a fence, and invaded the private school and took away 6 students and the 2 teachers. And from what I heard, and from what I heard, this is almost about 44 students in the past 1 year that have been kidnapped, taken away in Kaduna or thereabout. Wow. Yes, so it's an issue for our security agencies, especially the police. This is not a military issue this time around, because yes, it's not. It has nothing to do with Nigeria Army or any of the top military agencies. The security of life and properties internally is the work of the police.
Very,
is
very
yes, it's
important.
that of the police, and something should be done.
Which brings me to you, Cyril. when this issue begins to, it's not just starting now, but then when our children are no longer secure in schools, what is the implication, especially for the future of these children?
No, exactly. I mean, those are my thoughts. There is something very, very abnormal, something very fundamentally wrong with our national imagination, if there is one anyway. You can't have a timeline or a track record of such infamy. You had like you pointed out, Chibok, Dapchi, and so on. Go and look at countries that are doing well in certain sectors. It was because sometime in their past, they suffered, something about that. But it's as if we've not learned anything from Chibok to Buniyadi to Dapchi. And so for a country that has the highest rate of out-of-school children in the world, which is not a joke anyway, and then by the sheer numbers, we are that way because of people that are out of school, particularly girls in the north. And so if attackers can keep on having a field day on schools, one, parents will be afraid to send their children to school. Two, even children wouldn't want to go to school. And so number three, what are we now doing about it? Because the fact is that, you see, education, I will say it again,
is the bedrock of any society.
The EU said, look, any country that cannot train a child for 15 years consecutively shouldn't even be a member. The discussion ought to really, really change. Because without education, the child does not have a future, and the nation does not also have a future. There's the difference between sending a boy to school and sending a girl to school. If you don't send a girl to school, an uneducated woman, people speak their mother tongue. That's how illiteracy passes on to children. So by now, the discussion should, we're not supposed to be discussing this. What is the level of security? I am amazed. If you want to protest about this sort of thing in Kaduna or in Abuja, police will come and say they have an intelligence report that Muslims want to talk about that kind of protest. But they didn't see those Muslims that are about to go and kidnap the girls. It's a travesty. But we say it, and now it sounds really cliched because we need to do something about it. What do we need to do? Nothing gets done. But we need to do something about it. So
we need. I agreed. We need to do. You asked the question: have we learned from all of the experiences that has happened before this incident? Yeah. Does it seem we have learned? Because if we have learned, the discussion, like you said, should have changed. And what should be the line of discussion now?
Yes, the narrative has to change. The narrative has to change. Every single school in the country should be well protected. Do
we have enough security?
That
do you have the capacity
that's where I'm going to, and that is where some of us...
So it's a complex issue then?
Yes, but that is where some of us have been crying out loud that which issue of state police should come into place. Some of this, our policing system should be localized. If you go to the advanced world, there are every level of security. In the county, if you go to US, United Kingdom, they are in the counties have their police, apart from the national police. And the essence is that some of these places that the Nigerian police, because of their number, cannot be able to reach quickly. It is much easier for spokesman of the police to come out and say, oh, we are doing, which they always do. Whenever something like that happens, the spokesman comes out, we are on top of it, we are trying to make sure most often than not, we should be preventing issues, these kind of things from happening, rather than reacting to, you understand what I'm saying? And that is where intelligence comes into play. What level of intelligence do our security agencies have? Because if they have a good network within the communities, you'll be shocked that some of these people all come from within some of these communities.
Like the instance of Siasia's mom that spent over 70 days kidnapped. One would have expected that if it was state police, perhaps information would have been gotten. This issue of intelligence and state policing.
This is the problem, The state policing debate can continue, but this is the issue. When you want to carry 66 people from one location to another, how can you succeed without complicity? I don't like window dressing or to play around the issues. We must be pragmatic in how we assess these things. You cannot, when the Dapchi thing happened.
Yes.
People are pointing fingers. Till today, the report has not been made public. The occasion is that somebody said that there was a phone call after they picked the girls, and somebody said,
So
we
who
not
did
have
what?
them.
Yeah.
And you know, so the question is, how
So
do
issues of consequence.
how do you move 66 people without anybody noticing?
So are you saying that issues where there are no consequences for people's actions is also fueling things like this?
One, and then number two is the fact that you cannot achieve everything by law. Law and order is built on morality. Legality, laws come direct from morality. Nigeria does not have, somebody said that, I always say, but somebody said we don't have the sophistication to achieve it. Nigeria does not invest in reorientating the mind, in dealing with, so I mean, in 48 hours, somebody has not seen something that you should be able to call the police or do anything about it. People, you can't have such a net. See, Veronica, if this happened in China or in the US or other places,
by now there should be concrete
you would
information.
have, and nothing was going to, and there was no clue where they were. People who should have been fighting this would have perhaps been the ones that were even doing it in the first place. See what I mean? You cannot organize this sort of thing by using armed robbers and bandits and people who are just, who want to commit crime entirely. What I'm saying is that people who should be fighting this are part of it. Otherwise, there's no way.
Those are weighty allegations.
Yes.
There is no way anywhere in this world where I think Osani Abacha, the people always credit this saying to that when terrorism lingers for more than 24 hours, that the government is involved. The issue is this. There is no way you can gather a community of bad people all together, maybe 10, 20 of them, without having more. You know, this whole thing sounds very funny.
You also have to build confidence in the
over
people.
A very long period of time.
We have to build confidence in people, because the problem we're also having is people volunteering information is very, very key. In other climes, events is happening, everywhere here, anything, they just call the police or security. But the problem we're having here is that our people are so afraid to volunteer information to volunteer information to security agents, because at times there have been instances where you volunteer such information and they become a victim. They turn around to come and or even pass the same information to the same people that we are listening. So for that, the problem has always been the connection, for us to have a connection between the security agencies and the people. We should be able to build confidence in the people to believe in their security agents that whatever information I pass to you, you will use credibly without it being traced back to me. There have been instances where somebody reported about armed robbery or thieves and the rest of them, only for him to get to the police station and
he was arrested.
Yes, and he was arrested. And there have been instances where at the end of it, or the same people, gang will call you and say, oh, so now you go go tell police, okay, you go see. So
in fairness to the Kaduna government,
people find it difficult.
You know, Governor Rufai enrolled his son in a public school.
Yes.
Which means that the government believes, at least, that, you know, for its own part, it's doing something to keep schools safe, and for people to believe that, you know, schools are actually, but what has happened is a major setback. It's a major setback. And I think that, you see, even where we don't have state police, look, in River State, they have neighborhood watch. In Lagos State, I think they have a similar thing.
Yes.
State government should do that.
All right.
At least, if not for carrying arms, they can help to monitor what goes on around their neighborhoods and report.
Schools.
It's important.
In schools.
It's
absolutely
important.
Thank you, Cyril Abaku, Chris Kendingwandu, gentlemen. Thank you for your time
very much for
on the newspaper review.
Thank you.
You're watching.
Let's head to the papers now, see what the headlines are across Nigeria. And I have with me in the studio is CEO, CKN News, Chris Kendingwandu, as well as senior researcher, TVC News, Cyril Abaku. Gentlemen, good morning.
Good morning.
Thank God it's Friday.
Thank you.
Right. Blueprint is where we start from. Blueprint, let's see what Blueprint has this morning. It's focusing on xenophobic attacks. It says Nigeria, South Africa to raise compensation committee. Reciprocate our ease of doing business. Buhari tells Ramaphosa and President's visit allays our fears. That's the association Nikasa saying that. All right. From Blueprint, let's go to News Direct. And it's focusing there on port terminal crisis on the News Direct. It says why MPA must reverse termination of BUA lease agreement as stakeholders seek justice for the company called the BUA. All right, that's the News Direct. Daily Times is where we go next, and it focuses on the 2020 budget. And we hear the president will be passing it to the National Assembly in about next week. National Assembly proposes 727.4 billion naira increase in expenditure. and increases customs revenue to 1.5 trillion naira and jacks up oil revenue by 172 billion naira. And pegs new borrowing at 1.5 trillion naira, increases capital to MDAs by 357 billion naira. Okay, we'll be looking at the budget issues on the show. Now, Daily Trust is the next one now. How gunmen kidnapped Kaduna schoolgirls and teachers. Parents evacuate children from school, and victim called grandmother from bush. It's really troubling times across the school there, I must say. All right, gentlemen, but it's really troubling, the news from Kaduna State, very troubling. But let's go into the 2020 budget now. We hear the president will be passing it to the National Assembly, or presenting it rather to the National Assembly on Tuesday next week, all things being equal. But the point there is, the medium-term expenditure framework has been presented and is 2020-2022, and it seems to be going on well. And based on that, there has been some, projections. It seems everything is almost the same, exchange rate and all of that. Cyril, let me start with you here. What optimism do you share or have when it comes to the 2020 budget, considering how 2019 budget performed or is performing?
Well, I don't know which of the years in the past 4 years or so when we have had absolute full performance of the budget. I think it was the Minister of Labour that said they were going to carry over what they didn't spend into the new one. One of the key aims that they are trying to achieve now is to see how the budget cycle can be regularized so that it runs from the beginning of the fiscal year to the end. But I think that the content of what it is that they've proposed is still what remains a challenge for most of us, because there's no departure from the norm and there's no real creativity going into this whole thing. For one, the fact that you have an overbearing recurrent over a lean capital simply shows that we're going to do very little. Bad roads, electricity and so on, basic infrastructure. The things that should actually create a background, or a groundwork to economic recovery, will not get a major boost. And then on top of that, we are still going to expand the debt corridor by borrowing more. So it's not exactly a new song that we're going to be singing. Let me pass it over.
It's still a deficit budget. Now, the area of performance, CKN, is one thing that is on the mind or very dear to the heart of Nigerians. They have always complained that budgets don't perform. 50% average performance, not excellent performance or even a pass mark. The Minister of Labour has said the activities will be rolled over to 2020. But certainly it has not affected the budget size or the figure that is being rolled over into 2020 yet. What concerns do you have when it comes to performance?
For me, irrespective of whatever is being proposed, the most important thing to everybody, and including the ordinary man on the street, is how does this affect me? How does it affect my life? How does it affect my well-being?
Exactly.
So that is what
they don't know what the figures
They don't know. If you like,
all the rates. They don't know all those statistics.
What I want to know is that once I get to the market, if Gary was 2 naira of 10 naira or 20 naira a cup last year, if I can get it for 5 naira, that means it's affected. That means that, or if I'm plying the roads and I can get to where I want to get to earlier than I want to do, that means it's working. Or when I get my house, if I've been having 1 hour electricity in the past 1 or 2 years, I decide you are now trying to give me 3 hours. That is for the average man. That is what matters.
That's how they measure.
That is how they measure it. So with 20 trillion, 30 trillion, and it doesn't. But the most important thing, as Sri rightly said, is that the problem we've always had is having an overbearing recurrent expenditure rather than emphasizing more on capital. That is across the globe. That is what it's supposed to be. you come to realize that at the end of it, so what do they use it for? They use it for paying of salaries of civil servants, their traveling allowances, and the vehicles, all these old vehicles that the National Assembly and rest of that's recurrent. And when you now look at it in totality, how many percentage of these individuals constitutes the population of the country?
Yes.
That is the problem we're having. Okay, so if you look at the recurrent, and we'll continue talking of recurrent, it is just some few people that are really, really enjoying that. You see that when you say the president has gone to South Africa with returnees of ministers, governors, aides, and the rest of them, they will collect extra codes. That is part of the recurrent. But the average man in the Dumont or in my village in Obo, he's not getting anything out of it. So that is the problem we'll be having. So until we'll be able to do that, then we are not getting on. Then secondly also, the National Assembly should up their game in their oversight functions. Because the situation where certain provision is made for certain infrastructure projects and the rest of them, the ministries are not measuring up at making sure that at the end of it all, that those budget, you said 50%, there's never been any time that our budget in the last 5-10 years has hit up to 50%.
But government officials will come to say,
that is what they will tell you. That is what they will tell you. And you know the most annoying part of it, when you start getting to November now, they now say, make returns. Whatever that's not
they used to make returns in the last dispensation.
You know that, so now they're trying to go over.
Cyril,
so I hope that we just get it right this time around.
All right. So. All right. Now, Cyril, one area, the issue of returning the budget cycle from January to December is something that Nigerians applauded when the issue came up. And there was the projection that if the budget is passed to or sent to the National Assembly by September, the National Assembly or the Senate President was particularly saying that they'll be committed to ensuring that they pass it by December so that it can be, operational from January. Do you see that being threatened right now?
Maybe not. At least for one, that we have a National Assembly that is more than willing to cooperate with the executive arm of government. So yeah, I mean, when a document lands on their desk, they'll be able to look at it, take it to the various committees and begin to dissect it and see how they can. But I foresee that these figures are not going to remain the same. Mike, principally, the core responsibility of lawmakers is appropriation. Appropriation is not just budget. Budget is a casual word. That thing is a law. It is passed into law. So, it's a law. I hope that, they'll do the needful. Look at what they even put the oil benchmark at. The situation inside of the is not going to be there forever. The indicators will continue to be dynamic.
Of course.
What we need to do,
volatile.
Yeah. So what we need to do is to look at realistic. What is realistic? In terms of our own domestic policy, and make sure that takes center stage in a planning process. And then Mr. President should also endeavor to make sure that the budget office does not exist only in name. Ministries that, to whom money has been allocated should get their due. The minister, I think one minister said during the screening that, look, you will fight and just to even get your own allocation. Why should that be the case?
And lobby, fights, lobby.
Why should that be the case?
It's a law already. It's a budgetary issue. So the money should be released. But we understand the president approved the release of about 600 billion just about during the week, for projects and all of that.
In order to make that cycle, I think the president has to also be very, very firm with the various ministries, the ministers, so that when the National Assembly calls them to come and defend that, because that has always been the problem.
Okay. That's
a very, very important key, because totally most often than not, when they call them to come and defend them, most of them don't show up at the rest of them, and it drags and the rest of them.
But a lot of them have also complained that they are told to bring this and bring that.
Yes, but they should be able, now that they should be able to know, that they're going to defend that.
Thank you very much, Chris Kendingwandu, for coming on.
Thank you very much for having me.
Cyril Abaku, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.